Pledge allegiance, Councilmember Powell. Roll call.
Member Brett White,
Here.
Member Rob Powell,
Here.
Councilmember Pryan,
Here.
Councilmember Kraft is absent, Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Present.
Councilmember Lawson. Here. Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
Larkey.
Here. We have a quorum. Personal appearances A, proclamation for Parks and Recreation Month. They all, why don't you all, get them all up here.
The entire
Come on, Parks
department.
folks.
Come on. It's for you guys. That's Swifty there. Ask her how her concert went. Oh, okay.
No. Hello, thanks. Come on, it'll be fun. All right, almost everybody. We'll leave Michael in, I guess. Okay. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of communities throughout the country, including Belton, Missouri, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks, and whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. And whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, swimming pools, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation is a leading provider of healthy meals, nutrition, services, and education. And whereas Parks and Recreation programming and education activities such as out-of-school time programming, youth sports, and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas Parks and Recreation is fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community. And whereas Parks and Recreation is essential and adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas the U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month. And whereas the City of Belton recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore Norman K. Larkey Sr., Mayor of the City of Belton, does hereby recognize the month of July as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Belton, Missouri. We urge all citizens to visit the beautiful parks in Belton. In witness whereof, Mayor Larkey has hereunto set his hand and caused the seal of the city to be affixed in the City of Belton, Missouri, this 11th day of July in the year of our Lord, 2023.
I'd just like to thank all of our staff, especially our
You got here.
part-time, and, I mean, we have a lot of part-time staff, and without them, we wouldn't be able to do all this stuff.
Yay.
P, Mr. Olson. State your name and your address.
Bob Olson, 114 Mary Way. And I think in the clerk want my copy of my notes. It's my wife Mary Ann here. I have a complaint about having to pay for a recycling program that some people may not want. I've had to think it through. In fact, I wish this whole thing would have came out in a recycling card about probably a month or so we could think about it, where we'd put it and everything else. Right now I'm in on it, so I'm pretty good shape on it. Greetings. With both my wife and I being retired, we both are on both fixed incomes. We also do not normally produce much trash. In fact, I put out the trash for tomorrow. I have one 13-gallon bag and a grocery sack in it. That's about all we have. Our current 65-gallon, and according to our public work guy, that's 69 gallons. I didn't know that. Receptacle in our garage, and we do not want to take on the added liability of storing one under our rear deck, which I'll probably put it under there and chain it so it doesn't get stolen. We've lived in Belton since early 1993 after I retired out of the Navy. In that time, we personally saw the abuses to the previous recycling programs here in Belton, when recycling dumpsters were first on a city-owned lot on 2nd Street, behind City Hall, and then later behind the fire department on 163rd and Mullen. We observed drywall from houses and bagged trash that had been put into those dumpsters. Another issue that the city council and our fellow citizens need to consider is the additional damage to our city streets that will eventually come about in running an additional heavy vehicle on these streets. Under recycling instruction, it says that materials inside the cart should be clean, loose, and dry. My wife and I both can tell you that it takes up to 3 days to dry out an empty apple juice bottle if we reuse it to freeze milk. So that's something that's going to take a little time. The bottom line is, why should people like us who see the financial insufficiency of recycling to our fellow citizens and probably our city government have to pay for a service that we don't need? We do not believe that a private business could survive under such wasteful spending in people, power, and resources. Let those who want to recycle do it under their own expense, not the rest of us who might not agree. On a small scale, recycling has failed in the past here in Belton. This begs the question as to why is our city government trying to do it again in a big scale? My wife reminded me that the last time Belton tried curbside recycling with small containers, that it failed. Respectfully, Bob and Mary Ann Olson.
Any questions? Thank you. Unfinished business. A, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-33.
An ordinance accepting a Missouri Secretary of State Electronic Records Initiative grant.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmembers Goff,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Pryan,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Clark,
Aye.
and carries.
Motion carries. B, motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-34.
An ordinance approving the reappropriation and revision of the City of Belton fiscal year 2024 adopted city budget.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Goff,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmembers Pryan,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White.
Aye.
Motion carries. New business. A, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-35.
An ordinance approving the 17th Amendment to the Old Town Belton redevelopment plan to approve the 112 Main Street project as redevelopment project 2023-04 and to authorize tax abatement as described therein.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and now I will open up the public hearing regarding the proposed 17th Amendment to the Old Town Belton redevelopment plan for redevelopment project 2023-04 pursuant to section 353.110.3 subparagraph 2 RSMO. Anybody here to speak on the public hearing?
Yep, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is a request for a new tax abatement project in Old Town Belton at 712 Main Street. The applicant is requesting approval for $28,000 in exterior improvements to the property, which includes a roof replacement, new gutters, exterior painting and staining, a new storm door, and new landscaping. The Old Town Belton Board recommended unanimous approval of the request on June 15th, and a public hearing notice was sent to taxing jurisdictions on June 23rd. Staff recommends approval of the project and requests a double reading this evening to allow the property owner to begin improvements, and I believe the property owner is here if there are any questions.
Anybody else to speak at the public hearing? You guys want to speak? Is that them? Oh, sorry, wrong. It's blurry. You guys want to speak? I'm sorry. You don't have to, so, all right. Anybody else on the public hearing? Hearing none, public hearing is closed. Any council discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading. Any discussion on the motion for a second reading? Hearing none, roll call.
Voice vote.
Oh, boys. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Motion approving the final reading of Bill 2023-35.
An ordinance approving the 17th Amendment to the Old Town Belton redevelopment plan to approve the 712 Main Street project as redevelopment project 2023-04 and to authorize tax abatement as described therein.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Council members Richardson,
Aye.
Lawson. Aye. Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Goff.
Aye.
Mayor Larkey,
Yes.
Councilmember Pryan,
Aye.
and Councilmember Clark.
Aye.
Motion carries. P, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-36.
An ordinance amending sections 20-2, 20-6, and 40-2, and adding section 20-7 of the Unified Development Code related to public noticing requirements and alternative development standards for plating processes.
Present.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
Yep, before this evening are UDC text amendments for public noticing and alternative development standards for plats. Staff is recommending changes to the public noticing process to streamline the process and limit the potential for noticing errors. Currently, it is the applicant's responsibility to send certified public hearing notices to all property owners within 185 feet of the property. Staff is proposing to resume this responsibility as it was prior to April 2018. Letters will only be sent via regular mail, which will reduce the cost of postage while still providing appropriate notice. Staff was asked by the Planning Commission to look into the notification distance to see if any changes should be made. Staff did research 8 other cities in the metro area and found that 6 cities have the same 185-foot notification distance. 2 cities notify at 300 feet, and then Raymore notifies at 185 feet as well, but they also send mailed notice to ward council members and an HOA representative if there's an HOA within that 185-foot boundary. Staff is also adding recommendations to add alternative development standards to the plating process, which would allow minor modifications to be requested through a plating process where a variance or PUD is not warranted. Some possible examples of that could include a modification to a lot size or a lot width or a build line. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on June 20th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the amendments. The Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the request, and staff also recommends approval.
Go ahead.
First of all, I mean, I think changing our model and sending them out regular mail is fine, just like you stated, that I think people don't go up, pick up certified mail because they think it's something bad and they will actually open it up and read it. The second thing, what we've added in our process over the last couple of years is putting that sign out, which allows people more than 185 feet to see that as they drive by. And just, I've noticed one today that I talked to you about earlier, and I think that's probably a better thing to do anyhow, just because more people farther out will see that as they drive by it. So I think currently what we're doing and what you want to change, I agree with, so.
Go ahead.
Gotta get to this first. I agree with Dave that we need to do more than just 185.
I didn't agree, I said 185 is fine.
But
We
you
put a
added the
sign out.
signs. So, I'm agreeing with the signs. One of the things that was over in Bradford Place, with the apartments is there were people that were notified, but across the street who even still had direct line of sight didn't receive notification because they were, a few feet longer than 185. And they were just as affected as those across the street. So I think we do need to think about, since they're not going to move it 185, past 185, I think signs would be very helpful to those who are not going to get it, but who or will be affected by the addition.
I would note for the benefit of the council and the public that the 185 feet measurement is statutory, and it is sent out because those are the property owners that can file a valid protest petition in regards to rezoning, which increases the approval majority required by the city council. That is why the 185 foot standard is
I
there.
think
and
our
that's why
sign
it's
that
sent
we
out.
put out now alerts other people more than 185 that property is going through a rezoning process so they can inquire about it. So, I mean, I saw one today and I inquired about it and wanted to know what was going on, and I think it works.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, following up on this, I think the signs are a good idea too. In fact, I think it should be signs, maybe 185 feet on either side of the property on the street, because a lot of times when you're going down North Scott, there's a property in the back there and it had a sign for the longest time, but nobody noticed it because it was like 40 feet off the road. If it was right on North Scott, people would at least slow down maybe and try to read it. So I would suggest at least 2 more signs on the roads, the 2
Has to be
ends
on
of the
that
road
property,
leading
though.
towards the, what?
It has to be on that property.
Does it?
Yeah. Because if
and
you
the city
if you
right
put it
away?
on someone else's property, they're thinking that property is going through some type of a zoning change.
Yeah, and
No, not necessarily.
In this amendment, I think specifically have said it has to be within 5 feet of the front property line. We don't want it in the right of way, but it does need to be at the front property line to be visible.
Okay. Well, then that would have corrected what I saw on North Scott. And I guess my second thing is, I've had a couple people who actually saw this and saw what was going to be proposed and called and had a question about the certified mail. And I was going to ask the question, but Dave preempted me by answering the question if anybody on the council had knew of residents who actually took certified mail and ignored it, and apparently they do. So I'm kind of shocked because when I get certified mail, I mean, that's at the top of my mail list, but I would think if we're doing away with certified mail and it doesn't cost anything extra, if you just put return service requested on the envelope, then you'll at least get back that the landlord's moved. You'll get something back from the post office that says address unknown, and then you'll know for a fact that guy didn't or that woman didn't get their mail. We do that all the time in mailing out newsletters. So, but I still think I just don't know how if somebody comes up a month after construction starts and says, "Hey, you never notified me," how we're going to prove that we notified them. But I guess we're willing to live with those
Well,
suits.
it's easier for us to track that internally than rely on the applicant to provide us with that information. So we'll keep mailing lists of everybody that we did mail the letters to. And then in regards to the certified mail, I had a call this afternoon from somebody who just picked up their certified mail for a public hearing that was last week. So they're not getting that information. They would probably get it easier, more quickly if it was just regular mail.
Well, when you say pick up, you mean it goes to a post office box? I mean, normally certified mail goes to the addressee.
Well, if they
If they're
don't,
not home,
if they're
they
not
won't
home, to
leave it.
sign
You
for
gotta
it.
go sign for it.
Well, okay, certified mail doesn't necessarily mean you have to sign for it. That's return request or signature required.
You gotta sign the certified that you.
So we do the
accepted it, yeah.
additional part of requiring a signature. Okay,
And if they're not home, they won't take it to the post office and get it.
okay.
And sometimes the post office will try to deliver it 2 or 3 times, and they'll just say, your letter from the city of Belton is up at post office, please go pick it up from the hours of 8 to 5, and someone's like, I got a code violation, I don't want it.
Okay. I live in a different community, I guess. I don't know.
You're
Anybody,
old school, Rob, you're old school.
I'm old school, you're right. Old man, old school.
anybody else? James?
I'm good.
All right, all in favor?
Yes.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. C, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-37.
Ordinance adding Article 5 to Chapter 10 of the Unified Development Code to implement a rental inspection program.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
All right, before this evening are UDC text amendments, add a rental inspection program to Chapter 10 of the UDC. The recommended program was put together after several months of input from citizens, the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission, and City Council. This proposed program would require an inspection to be conducted when a rental unit is vacant between tenants. The requirement addresses concerns that were expressed by both landlords and tenants, with inspections being conducted when a unit is occupied. Included in the program is a list of items to be inspected, all of which are related to the health, safety, and welfare of the tenant. Those include electrical outlets within 6 feet of a water source, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors, exterior address numbers, interior and exterior handrails, guardrails, stairs, and decks. Plumbing fixtures need to be in working order. There needs to be a safe, contiguous, and unobstructed ingress and egress between the unit and the right-of-way. Furnaces and water heaters must be installed and operational, and exterior doors and windows must be in working order for ingress and egress. If during an inspection, the inspector notices any structural conditions or hazards that may be an immediate threat to life, health, or safety, the enforcement official may initiate the dangerous buildings and structures process as defined in the UDC. Any failed inspections have 14 days to correct any items and schedule a follow-up inspection. Any deficiencies that are not corrected or failure to follow up on an inspection will result in a violation notice being sent and follows the standard code enforcement violation process. The Code Enforcement Advisory Committee met on February 23rd, 2023, and they recommended approval, and they also added some conditions, 2 of which are included in this program, and then 1 has been removed. That 1 item was requiring at least 1 inspection being conducted every 5 years, regardless of vacancy. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on March 21st, 2023, at which 2 landlords did speak, requesting clarification on those items. They were not specifically speaking in favor or in opposition to the program. The Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the proposed text amendments, including the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee's recommendations. Staff did bring forward the program to the City Council on March 28th, 2023 as part of a work session. Based on the concerns expressed at that work session, staff did remove the recommendation of the 1 inspection every 5 years from the final text tonight. All inspection and program monitoring will be conducted by city staff. There's no increase in staff currently being proposed. And then we are currently bringing forward a separate UDC text amendment to Planning Commission next week, which will come to City Council in August. That would establish a $10 rental inspection fee. The landlord business license will remain at $70 annually with no additional rate added per unit, which had been discussed as a potential option that most cities do use. Based on those fees, the fees would be the least expensive of any program in the region. Staff is proposing an effective date of July 1st, 2024, which aligns with the business licensing year and gives staff almost a year to notify current landlords, as well as coordinate with utilities and ownership data to locate and notify current landlords who are not licensed. This additional time will also allow us to complete the Central Square upgrade that will streamline the licensing and inspection process, and then it will also allow us time to conduct staff trainings and certifications for the program. Staff recommends approval of the UDC text amendments for the rental inspection program as proposed, and if approved, additional changes to Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances will be needed.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I have requested from day one that we put in a mechanism to get a name of a particular individual that we can make contact with. I've even provided cities to staff that have done that. And to date, I still don't know of if that's happened. So I do see in the definition of owner, it says any person having legal or equitable interest in the property. So that means, to me, an individual's name, not a corporation or some kind of company that we have no idea who they are. Because right now, you know, we can send letters to companies and they'll not get them because there's no one that's required to have it. So, have we resolved that?
Yeah, so our business licensing application for landlords does require a local contact to be included on there.
Does that contact have legal authority to make decisions, or is it just a name?
It is whoever we're able to reach out to if there is an issue. They may not be able to make a legal decision, but they would know how to get into contact with the individual who can make that decision.
Okay. And when will that become forward?
That's already in our application that we have currently. So that is something that we request currently in our landlord licensing
And if they don't
process.
give it, is the business license denied?
That I do not know, but I mean, I would assume that that would need to be filled out. If not, that's something that we can certainly make sure is filled out in the future.
Under the current section of the code requiring that in any application for a business license that is incomplete or business license application that is incomplete is not processed and then it's not issued.
Yeah, my experience is if you skip a line, then Andrea or somebody will call you and say, fill this in.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Couple things. I thought when we got done in March, maybe Allison, she went back and watched it, so maybe she can answer, but I thought we kept it at every unit's 3 years or younger didn't have to be inspected, and this one says 5 years. I thought we kept it at 3 years, but maybe I'm mistaken on that. Second thing is we never talked about money. My concern is going to be, I know me and the mayor and Joe had talked about one time of having a flat fee and not having a business license anymore. And now you're saying having a business license and charging $10. I've always thought the city has always maintained that we have to pay for the services rendered. So if we have an employee there making $40,000 a year doing an inspection and they're there for 30 minutes, we have to have that timesheet and they got to pay exactly what his or her time is. And I don't know if $10 is going to do that. So I guess my concern is making sure if we're doing the inspections that we are funding this properly to pay for those also.
Yeah, between the licensing fee and the rental inspection fee, I mean, that's something that's still going through the process right now. The $10 is what we're currently proposing. We can bring back, when that does come before council, some additional information about that fee.
I mean, conversations that we had off script and all that stuff, but I thought we needed around $40 or $50 per unit to actually pay for somebody. So, I mean, everything that I guess Andrea's told me over the years is when we do a study, we basically trying to find out how long, like the sunshine laws, how long it takes us to copy and all that stuff, and then we charge for that service. And I think we got to do the same for this too.
Yeah.
So staff did go through that process as is required by Missouri law whenever a fee is imposed by the city council. And at this point, the $80, which is the combined license fee plus the $10 rental inspection fee, is currently determined by staff to meet that requirement of paying for the services that are.
I get if someone has one unit, but if somebody has, 200 units, I mean, they're paying $70 plus, was that $2,000? And I mean, they're getting, I don't know how many hours it's going to take one of our people to go through all those units. And I know it's not going to be every year, but it's going to be, they might go through 25 or 30 units every year. But if you think it's feasible, I mean, that's, the city's got to pay for it. That's just my thoughts.
Well, to answer your first question, on page 35, 10-142, B. It says an inspection is not required for dwelling units that are less than 3 years old. Matt's handout was slightly confusing because later in his handout, it has the thing that that the Planning Commission voted on where it was 5 years. But if you look at page 35, you'll see that it says 3 years. But I want to make a motion to amend this to put back in the requirement of every 5 years. And that would simply mean putting back in the sentence that was taken out, which says, however, regardless of occupancy, at least one inspection shall be conducted every 5 years for long-term occupancies. And so I make that motion to amend.
We have a motion on the floor.
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I went back and watched the March 28th meeting where we all kind of fleshed out some ideas to make this program the most successful it can at this starting point. I think there will be adjustments over time. What I am weighing more heavily right now is the input from the Code Enforcement Advisory Committee and the Planning Commission that presented it to us with the 5-year reinspection. I'll call out that Councilmember Richardson had a good idea about a waiver option. If we were to notice these people that, hey, it's been 5 years, it's time to reinspect, you as the tenant are the only one that can sign the waiver. I think that's maybe some flexibility that would make the program more feasible. So anyway, to that.
Yeah, that is a good idea. But the CAC, or the Code Enforcement Advisory Council, did put this in. It was with that stipulation of every 5 years, was approved by the Planning Commission 7-0. And the reason, which was pretty well verbalized at the last SEAC meeting, was that everybody seemed to have an example of a neighbor or a set of neighbors who are tenants who are afraid to volunteer for an inspection because they figured it'll cause a rent increase or some other, possibly even an eviction or other action from their landlord. Now, you might just say, hey, they just have to buoy up and do it anyway, but I don't see any reason other than if they don't want it, and then I would take Chris's or Councilman Richardson's example, or a further motion, I guess, to amend my amendment to add that if the tenant actually signs off that they don't want it, then that would solve the problem.
All right, so we have a motion to amend the motion on the floor to amend the regular motion. Is there a second?
She seconded it.
No, she got a second.
I'll second the waiver amendment to the motion.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to amend the amendment to the regular motion. Any discussion on that? Go ahead.
This was a compromise that I think was made for people like me that are flat out against anything like this. Personally, I'm against the rental inspection program altogether, but when it's unoccupied, I can live with it. I have tenants who came up to me that basically said, how dare you come into my house? I have an agreement with the landlord. They take care of me, and I don't want you in my house. And I think what we did here was a first step to get this going. I signed off on this because it was unoccupied. If we put this in here, you guys can vote on it, and if that's what everybody wants, that's fine. But I think we're going against what we did that night when we talked about this. I mean, this is a good step, what we started here, and by adding that amendment here, now all of a sudden we're going back on what we told the landlords and what we told the tenants. You're always going to have people that fit what you're talking about. But mandatory, making everybody that's been in their houses for 10 years have some rental inspection program and they don't want it. And we got people at that meeting that said, you better come with a search warrant.
Well, that's what the waiver is all about too.
Forget about the waiver.
Well, we're not
I mean, everybody's going to do a waiver then. The landlords are going to say, you better sign that waiver or your rent's going up. What about that? Chris?
That was my same comment too. If they're so against their landlord saying anything, they're gonna sign the waiver no matter what.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I
Your
feel
rent's
like
going
it's
up
kind of
50
a-
bucks if you don't sign this waiver.
Originally, I said that, and I did agree with it, but you can actually call and get an inspection. Is it up to one every year, I believe, is what I read, right?
Yeah,
That's what it says, yeah.
So-
property owner or a tenant.
And I'm
can call
fine
for-
with if a
So the tenant
tenant
can
or
call in-
landlord wants it. Sorry, Councilman
Oh, no, you're
Richardson.
good,
I
you're
mean,
good.
I'm fine with someone voluntarily wanting to do it. Hey, that's on them. I'm fine with that. Either the landlord or the tenant can voluntarily call up every year and have us come out and inspect it. I'm perfectly fine with it. I just don't want to be that person that interferes with someone's legal documentation between a rental agreement and they're happy. It wasn't just one. I've had 4 or 5 tenants come up to me and said, I don't want anybody in my house. And I agree with them.
I'm
No
against
one
the-
comes into my house without my permission.
I'm against the 5-year waiver just because they can already call up to once a year. We're kind of just, it's kind of a waste, I feel.
All right, let's get back on the motion to amend
It's
the
a motion,
motion.
isn't it? 5 years waiver.
Well, we're on the motion to amend the motion with the waiver. Do you have anything, Councilman Wyatt? On the motion to amend the motion? That's fine, but we gotta deal with the motion to amend the motion. Do you have
I don't
anything?
even know what I'm voting on.
We're amending the motion to add the waiver option.
This next voice vote will be regarding whether or not to amend Councilmember Powell's initial motion to amend to include, in addition to the 5-year requirement, also a process for the tenant to waive that 5-year inspection. So that is what this first voice vote will be
What's
on.
on the floor right now? Any other discussion on that?
I'll just add, revisiting a lot of what's being said right now was also said on March 28th, and we all kind of took a guess that the tenant turnover is 2 to 3 years. No one knows. We don't have that data point. I think that will make a more informed decision, but we have to start the program as it is. If staff had access to that data, I don't know regionally or in the metro about how frequently tenants turn, that might be useful, but without that information, I think a 5-year re-inspect with an option to waive, I think that's a good compromise, but we'll just put it to a vote.
Well, just, again, I'll reiterate, the Codes Enforcement Advisory Council, 11 regular citizens, just like us, all unanimously voted for the 5-year, and also the Planning Commission for the 5-year. And so we all have different experiences. You have experiences of tenants who don't like that, and they had experiences from their neighbors of tenants that were scared and hanging on by the edge of their teeth to keep their apartment. So
Are we talking
that-
about the same amendment?
Yeah, go ahead. We're on the motion to amend about the waiver.
So I think,
That's it.
like,
5 years.
yeah,
Not the 5-year.
no, we're talking about the
We're
waiver.
About the motion to amend the motion, the waiver, adding the waiver, the tenant waiver.
Okay, so we can add the tenant waiver to the 5 years. That's what this is about.
That's what this motion
And then
to,
vote on the 5 years.
yes.
I'm ready.
Be like Chris, call for the motion.
All right, call for the question. Yeah, we're confusing you a lot. So, all in favor for the motion to amend the motion as amended? Is that right?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
3 ayes.
No.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails. We're back to the motion to amend the regular motion to extend it.
A tie also is a fail.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you knew that, sorry. So we're back to the motion to amend the regular motion to go from 3 years to 5 years.
No, this is a mandatory.
No.
Mandatory 5 years.
The motion currently in front of the council is a motion to amend the bill to add in, or to add back in or add in the requirement that all units are inspected every 5 years, regardless of occupancy turnover.
Go ahead. Now you can talk.
Is there a way to determine or find out?
Mike's not on.
Mike,
Or Mike.
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 And it's on.
Now it's Belton, yeah.
On. Is there, do you have access to data in the regional area that looks at the average and length of times people are in rentals?
I have not
Not,
located that data. Doesn't mean that it's not out there, but it's probably pretty hard to locate that data and then figure out exactly how that fits in with the city of Belton, specifically the rental units in Belton.
We could potentially pull that through utilities.
I mean, I don't know if you can get that data from like water bills, how often they turn over. I mean, I think on the March 28th, again, I didn't go back and look at it like Councilwoman Lawson did. My memory serves either Matt or Joe basically said the 3 years was basically most units are turned over at least once, if not twice, in every 3 years. And that's why the first 3 years are brand new, and after that, they were going to require inspections starting after 3 years, which I'm fine with. You change it to 5, again, I'm fine with that. I just don't want it to be mandatory if residents are happy with their current agreement. And now we got rid of the waiver thing. There's no waivers to worry about, so.
I guess
Anybody else? Go ahead.
my question is, and this sounds personal, but anyway, I'll say it. The Planning Commission voted 7-0 to have this in there, and 2 of you were on the Planning Commission on 2 of the 7 votes. So if there's some reasonable reason, and not that Dave's isn't reasonable, but some other reason that you might think this is inadequate, then I'm willing to listen. But for now, I know that after the March 28th or 25th or whatever city council meeting, there was a May 25th SEAC meeting, and everybody said, we worked a lot on this. We have the information from our neighbors. We know what we want, and we want this back into the RIP, the Rental Inspection Program. So,
Go ahead.
My only thing with that, Councilman Rob, or Powell, is people don't call code enforcement people. People don't email code enforcement people. They email their city council members. They call city council members and let us know what they think about this. They're not coming up to planning and zoning and telling you they don't want this. And they're not coming to code enforcement advisory council meetings either and telling you they don't want it. So, but they do call city council members. They stop me at grocery stores. They stop me at terrors. They stop me whatever and tell me what they want and what they don't want because they know what position I'm in. So I have to listen to people that contact me.
all right.
And I think, me, it's not about landlords. It's all about the tenants. And the tenants are the ones telling me this is what they want. I respect their rights. So I'm going off what the tenants are telling me.
Okay. And I'm going off what the SEAC members told me.
But tell the SEAC, ask them if they can come into their house every 5 years.
Yeah, they said yes.
Oh.
And
I bet
to
you
be
they say yes, and then you say, we're coming in your house, and like, hell you are. They ain't coming in my house.
To be perfectly honest, I'm a landlord too. I rent out the house next to me. And that guy and the woman before him had no problem with this. So I don't know. I still think it's a good thing to have for people who are struggling with broken down plumbing, et cetera, not getting their landlord to fix it.
Well, the other thing I will tell you, Councilman Powell, is this was brought up about 3 years ago and it failed because of mandatory inspections. So if you want it to fail, then let's do mandatory inspections. If you want it to start and have a starting point, let's keep it as it is and move forward. We got to start it somewhere.
I agree. I mean, no matter how
Be changed in 3 years if they see that this is not working properly.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
All right, to answer your question about planning and zoning, I did vote yes for it. And why I voted yes for it, because I knew it was such a volatile situation that I wanted it to get to this council chambers and let us decide because we're the final decision makers. So that's why I voted yes. Go ahead.
Councilmember Clark, I'm just going to add that I don't think we as the council should presume about how folks that volunteer their time on our committees and boards gather information and feedback. Just because they're not on the city website as council doesn't mean that they don't seek out input from their neighbors.
Not saying they don't.
Well, I
And I respect their time and energy
I'll-
too.
Appreciate you. Let me finish. That's what I want to say, is that we do appreciate their time and their input, and we trust that they're doing the work that the way they volunteered to do it, and it's not really fair to disregard it because you don't think they're getting the same volume or the same type of input you are. So that's all I
I'm
can
just
say.
saying that they don't get contacted like I do or we do.
I don't know how you know that, but I would also add that they could also go seek out information for this
Yeah.
role they volunteered to take on, and I don't want to disregard that or disrespect that. And I
At
think
least
that's
two
what
of
we're
them went
saying.
door to door in their neighborhoods asking about this, knowing that there were rental properties, at least from the outside, looked like they're falling apart. And so they knocked on doors and they asked, and that's what they told. They said, "I'm not don't do that. Don't come in. Don't force me to call you. Just come in, and then I can blame it on the city. I don't want to be. I don't want to be blaming it
website,
on
and
the-
I don't see anybody's phone number from the Code Enforcement Advisory Council like I do when I pull up city council members.
Yeah, they're not listed like that. I'm saying they will seek out information. I know several people on the Code Enforcement Advisory Council who were really upset when we removed the 5-year requirement because they took the time to talk to their neighbors and get input. All I'm saying right now is due respect for them and their time.
Well, the funny thing is, not one of those people called me and told me that they were upset that I voted against that or wanted that removed. So it's weird. It's like
They came to me
they
about
got
it.
my phone number. It's on the website.
For whatever reason, I've been contacted by members of the,
Well,
this seems like a
again.
moot point.
I'm just telling you, it failed 3 years ago for the same reason that you guys are trying to do it. So if you want it to fail, let's keep it going.
I don't think that's true. I think it failed because the program itself is a mandatory inspection. What we are passing is a mandatory inspection. It is a finer detail about whether or not it's every 5 years. The point you're making isn't really the point you're trying to make.
I'm just telling you, 3 years ago when it went through, it was a mandatory inspection and it failed.
These are mandatory inspections.
These are
We are
not.
passing a program with mandatory inspections.
No, we're doing it when it's unoccupied.
Okay, that's a different point. You're making a different point here.
Still mandatory. Occupied or.
Well, if it's unoccupied, I don't care if it's mandatory then, but when it's occupied is what I care about.
All right, go ahead.
So if we're worried about their plumbing not working, like they say, they can make a call once a year and get an inspection. I don't understand why, I get the 5-year with the waiver, but they can make a call once a year and have their place inspected, so I don't,
Well, because then it says right here that the landlord, the property manager, and the tenant are notified. And as soon as the landlord hears that, they're afraid that the landlord's going to say, "What do you mean?" And just for that, you're out of here.
aren't they gonna be notified even on a 5-year?
But there's a difference
Sure.
between.
They're still gonna be
voluntarily-
notified.
Oops, microphone.
There's a difference between voluntarily called and the landlord thinking, oh, you called them, versus a requirement.
But they can sign a waiver if the landlord's on them that hard, they're gonna sign a waiver no matter what, so
You can't sign a
they
waiver
don't get
because
in
there's no
trouble.
waiver.
Yeah, we voted down the waiver amendment.
Down the waiver.
Well, right, they're
Call
going
for
to
the
sign, they're
motion.
going to sign a waiver. If they're worried about their landlord, they're gonna sign that waiver every 5 years, cause they don't wanna deal with it,
There is
guaranteed.
There's no waiver. We voted down that.
Right, if we did have,
Sure.
they're
You can
gonna
make that
sign it no
argument.
matter what.
What we went around on this in
Right.
March about there are people in a bad situation, right? They are in a rental property. It is very expensive to move. The rental property isn't safe. It isn't healthy. And they're going to be afraid to call the city and draw the ire of their landlord. I mean, we've talked about this. People are put in uncomfortable positions because they don't have enough money to move to a safe, healthy, clean rental. And that's what the city's trying to do with this program is eliminate those unsafe, unhealthy rentals. The finer detail of the 5 years or not, this program is a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe we can just call for question.
All right, we're gonna
Second.
call for a question.
A second.
This is on amendment, right?
This is on the amendment. All in favor?
Aye.
No.
No,
For the,
for the amendment.
This
Mandatory
is on the
5 years.
amendment.
not the call for the question. Oh, I thought we were on call for the
Call for
question.
a question you don't vote on.
I'm against it, no.
So you're a no.
Wait a minute, I got confused. Say it again, please.
Call for a question you don't vote. it ceases debate, and then you vote on the amendment.
Oh, okay.
So I said all in favor, and these two said yes, and then I said no, and then he said no, and he said no, and I don't know what you two said.
Well, we both said yes to the amendment. I'm not going to speak for Brad, but I said
This is about stopping the discussion and getting to the vote on the amendment.
No, call for the question, ceases debate, and then you immediately vote on the amendment that's in, or
Oh,
motion that's in front of you.
I'm sorry.
So we'll start over. We have a call for the question. I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion to amend. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails. So we're back to the motion
Can
of Bill 2023-37.
question?
Go ahead.
You'd said earlier that on the license.
Mike's
there's-
not on.
I'm on.
Oh, don't sound like
You're
it.
not hearing, we're not hearing you.
I'm right. Testing.
There you go.
You said earlier that on the business license, there's a name. But when I tried to get a hold of the corporate renters to get signatures for the speed humps, we couldn't identify names. So how is it that we can't identify them, but there's names on them, on the business license?
The business license name would be the official owner, which may be an LLC, but on the application form, there is a spot for the local point of contact.
Isn't there supposed to be an emergency management or emergency contact on there too?
Emergency contact, yep.
But that's for maintenance. That's not necessarily for being able to legally do things.
If a situation arises in which we need to contact somebody, we will contact the registered agent, which is their legal representative in the state of Missouri.
Do they have like POAs to sign documents or do stuff?
So the issue with getting into this is we are now talking about the corporate governance and structure of, in some cases, extremely large LLCs with multiple LLCs within them. So for us to verify and to prove that somebody has the legal authority to sign something, we would need resolutions approving it from all LLCs that might be involved or have any sort of ownership or majority ownership interest in that entity. As the council, I'm sure, is aware, with the ongoing purchase of single-family homes to be sold at rental or to be rented by large conglomerates, the likelihood of being able to do that is low.
But when
So-
there's cities that have accomplished that and we don't reach out to find out how they did that, that's disappointing to me. And I gave them names.
The city did review the city of Cleveland, which was the city that you provided their provision regarding a local person that had the authority to enter into a contract was discussed, but it could not be found in the ordinance.
Anybody else on the motion?
Well,
Go ahead.
I think that there are ways to, and possibly this is sufficient enough, because I will agree, I mean, I signed a business license and there are those lines about a local contact. But I think the discussion about this could be postponed to the next ordinance that's coming up.
We
for
can
vote.
have staff check on what you're wanting in the next 2 weeks,
Yeah.
because this is the first reading. Go ahead.
I'll only say to the staff here that I think this is a good compromise. I was here 3 years ago when it failed. I think the vote then was 7-2. So I think having a compromise and doing what we're doing and starting this program is a first step. I mean, we can always review this in the future to make sure it's still fitting what's going on. You know, I'll throw the 353 in here because a lot of rentals that I think we need fixed are down in the Old Town area. So having 353s that these people can fix up and make look better is also another good thing that we're doing here in the future. So I think this is a great compromise from what Matt and the staff did with the landlords and the tenants over at the police station that one night. Some of the stuff that came out of our city council meeting on May 25th or 28th, whatever day that was, I think this is a step in the right direction, and I think from everybody I talked to, I think we can live with it.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Finally, the air conditioner shuts off. D, a motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-38.
An ordinance amending Article XXI to Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances to implement a rental inspection program.
Present.
Second.
Before you, this is just amendment to Chapter 6 of the Code of Ordinances, which is the business licensing section of the code. And really the only changes to this chapter are amending the definitions to match the definitions in the rental inspection program chapter, and then referring to the rental inspection program.
Any questions?
Well, we've discussed, I was going to propose, yeah, everybody say, wow, shut that guy up. But anyway, I was going to propose that we make it more mandatory to address some of Brett's needs about the property manager being local and the owner, if he's not local, having a property manager. But you've reminded us that on the business license form, there is a requirement for a local I hate to use the word contact because that just seems he's going to pick up the mail, but somebody who can locally get in touch with the owner. So my question is, what is local? I mean, I was going to propose within 30 miles, but I mean, but local might mean a guy lives in Europe and he has his brother-in-law living in Illinois who's his local contact. That's not local to me.
I don't know if we have a definition of local, but it would just be somebody who's physically able to be on the site with limited notice.
Yeah. Well, I know when my house was on fire and I was 800 miles away in Houston, they called me up and said, you have to get here in 15 minutes. I said, you don't realize I'm 800 miles away. So in the I don't know. In the procedures to track down these people, I think Brett has excellent points. We're not finding them. We got LLCs on top of LLCs, and we really need a name of a person who, you're right, can make it here and make decisions and say, we are not going to fix that plumbing, or we are calling the plumber tonight, or whatever, and not somebody that has to fly in from Texas or Illinois or California or wherever. So I don't know, is there an issue with defining what local means? Or?
So under the current licensing scheme in the forms, specifically like the application form, are developed and approved by the license officer, which is the city clerk, who also then has the authority to interpret the answers and the provisions of not only the licensing section, but also the application. So given kind of the discussion, I think at least at a minimum, the city clerk could inquire as to how local was. So
Okay.
for example, if a landlord applied, listed somebody, and then asked, okay, where is this local representative actually located? And they said Illinois. I think that then at that point, the license officer could make the interpretation that is not a local representative and require a new person prior to the business license being issued.
Or maybe just add an extra line,
Exactly.
have their
yes.
address.
Yes, the city clerk could do that. The city clerk could, add something to the form that says this person must be located within 30 miles, 50 miles, whatever, of the property.
Go ahead.
I mean, I guess my question to you is, and I'm sure you don't have the answer, but just like what Councilman Powell said, he had a house in Ohio and he lived in Houston. How many times do we have that same scenario that we don't even know about, that they're rented out to maybe a family member or somebody like that? Because they probably don't come out and get a business license if it's just one single home. and again, I don't know if there's people out there that have a management company that, in his situation, that also, because they're leasing it and they're 800 miles and they're using a management company, but I just try to think, as a staff, we just got to try to get as many phone numbers as possible that we can contact people locally. I mean, it's always, if they're in California or Illinois, I mean, it's always going to be a local management company, I'd bet, but at least it's somebody here locally. But in your situation, I mean, I don't know, did they require business licenses in Ohio for that house that you rented?
Well, first of all, I wasn't renting. I owned the house just 2 blocks down the street, and we were
I thought you
we were remodeling it. The point is, the owner of the house or the person in charge isn't.
I thought you
isn't
said you were in
obvious
Houston, like living in Houston at the time when that
Yeah,
fire.
we were remodeling it before we moved up here.
Okay.
And it caught on fire. I mean, this is totally irrelevant, but the point is, if you don't necessarily know who to contact, and unless you have an address and a phone number. And I'm just maybe suggesting we could put that on the business license application for the local contact, rather than just saying, who's your local contact, and they just put a name, Joe Smith, there.
But what you brought up, just in my mind, it brought up like, if someone gets transferred to Houston for 2 years and they don't want to get rid of their house up here in Belton because they
Yeah.
want to come back,
Right.
I mean, they rent that out to a family member or a friend for 2 years. I mean, we probably never know about that.
Well, that's true, although it does say that someplace in here about a rental is truly a rental if there's no family member there. Now, again, there's another definition. What is family member? So,
It's my brother from another mother. There you go.
I mean, you could say you're related to 50% of the people in Belton, and so you say, okay, well, that's my
Right.
family member, yeah.
Go ahead.
You all have convinced me to vote for this. But I am very concerned because I know the city clerk and I spent quite a bit of time trying to identify the corporates at the state level, and they were still LLCs written. There was no individual names. And we couldn't identify, especially the ones that were in Bradford Place, we couldn't identify names upon who has the authority to make decisions. Now, the truck that comes by that does maintenances, I talked to them. They couldn't tell me names of people to call, even at a closer level. So I'm very concerned about that, because also residents of Traditions complained about that they didn't know how to contact certain people for things that they may need. So I'm very concerned that this is something that is going to drop. And, we're talking about our citizens that can't contact other than a maintenance person.
I would note, I pulled up the current Belton landlord residential application in the city of Cleveland's same one. We require the exact same thing that the city of Cleveland already requires. So for a corporation or an LLC, they are required to list the all officers of the LLCs on the form. Additionally, as written right now, it says name of local emergency contact, KC metro area. So under, with the parentheses, KC metro area. So I think, the broadest interpretation of that would be the CSA, and the more reasonable interpretation of that would be the MSA. So basically a 30-mile ring around Kansas City, as is currently written and provided on the current landlord application, business license application.
So we need to make sure that
Microphone.
we need to make sure that there's names and contact information on those forms. Okay.
I'll make sure they look into it. All right, anybody else on item D? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. E, motion approving first reading of Bill 2023-39.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for a digital billboard located near the southeast corner of Interstate 49 and East 163rd Street in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Right,
Go ahead.
before this evening is a request for a special use permit to convert an existing static billboard to a digital billboard. The billboard is located on the east side of I-49, south of 163rd Street and north of Hampton Inn. The billboard was constructed in 1989 and does not meet the current placement standards, size, and setbacks from property lines. With the special use permit, the applicant is requesting approval of alternative development standards to allow the billboard to be converted in its current form and location, which would allow the billboard to be located closer to an interchange and property lines than currently allowed, and the billboard to remain 5 feet above the current maximum height of 30 feet. Staff does not believe that approval of these modifications will have any negative impact and will be an improvement to the existing billboard. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on June 20th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the request. The Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the request, and staff also recommends approval. MoDOT has reviewed the application and has also approved the request, and the applicant is here this evening. If there are no unanswered questions or concerns with the request this evening, staff does request a double read to allow the applicant to proceed with the permitting process.
Any questions?
At some point you say, oh yeah, in 3C, you say in your staff recommendation, in case of malfunction, the sign display shall be defaulted to a blank screen. But in the letter from Formetco, who makes the sign, they say if the photocell fails, then it will revert to a timed on and off based on, I guess, the season of when it's daylight, when it's night, and not on the light that it's getting from the sun. And if the PC fails, it will still revert to a timed position until it actually goes off. So you may want to make sure that timer is set to 0 and that these that the photocells also require it to go to 0 immediately.
Hi, good evening. I'm Melissa Porley. I'm with Porley Outdoor Advertising, 127 Mulberry Street, Forestville, Missouri, if you need that. So the way the software works is if there is any kind of malfunction, the sign totally goes to black. That
Okay,
is the
good.
default. And then separately for Metco, that was more in particular to, they have photocell technology that automatically adjusts the lighting of the digital faces based on the ambient lighting. So going from dusk to midnight, things like that. So if for some reason one of the photocells malfunctions, then it goes to a particular setting. So it's two separate scenarios.
Okay.
But in any kind of malfunction with the PC or anything, it will go black.
Okay, because it says here thank you for that explanation.
Sure.
For Metco's letter, though, it does say, upon losses, if the control system for the face loses framing data from the player PC, the sign goes dark based on a configuration timer. Why doesn't it just say goes dark immediately?
You're an engineer, you know that
I'm not sure who
question.
wrote it, yeah.
Well, it sounds like there's a timer there, and so immediate is not 5 seconds later or 2 hours later. I don't know.
It's a multiple point photocell technology that takes many factors into consideration for the ambient lighting. Because in addition to sun and dusk, it also takes into account any ambient lighting from commercial activity nearby. So I think that they worded it longer than needed to.
Okay.
But in a malfunction scenario, it does go dark, completely dark.
Okay.
And there is a PC that runs the board, and there is a backup PC that
Okay,
runs the board
good.
that goes into effect as well.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead.
I just want to say we have one down by our business in Kansas City, and it is a great improvement. They're amazing. They look much better, so I'm all for it.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for a second reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for a second reading.
An ordinance, are you gonna?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. An ordinance approving a special use permit for a digital billboard.
reading
Oh.
first.
Sorry, you're right. All in favor for the second reading?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now go ahead.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for a digital billboard located near the southeast corner of Interstate 49 and East 163rd Street in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmembers Richardson,
Aye.
Lawson. Aye. Powell,
Yes.
Goff,
Yes.
Ryan,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Yes. Motion carries. F, motion approving the first reading of Bill 2023-40.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for a body art services business at 827 and 829 East North Avenue in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
We have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
Yep, before you this evening is a request for a special use permit for a body art service businesses at 829 East North Avenue, which is for Matriarch Body Piercings. They're proposed to be located at 829 East North Avenue as a separate business, and an expansion to Ink Spot Tattoos, which is at 827 East North Avenue in the Apple Valley Shops. Ink Spot Tattoos has been in operation since 2001. Although a special use permit is required, there are no specific review criteria or conditions for body art services. Because of that, and that body art service businesses and employees are required to provide professional registration through the state of Missouri, staff has been working on code amendments that would remove the special use permit process for body art service businesses in the future. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on June 20th, at which no one spoke in favor or in opposition to the request. The Planning Commission recommended unanimous approval of the request, and staff also recommends approval. Again, with the billboard, if there are no unanswered questions or concerns with the request this evening, staff does request a double read to allow the applicant to proceed with the business licensing approval as soon as possible, and the business owners are here this evening.
Any questions? Go ahead.
I don't have any question. I just have a comment. Been around for 22 years, no issues, so definitely will support her expansion.
Anybody else? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion for second reading?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
An ordinance approving a special use permit for a body art services business at 827 and 829 East North Avenue in the city of Belton, Cass County, Missouri.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mayor.
Yes.
Are you Melanie? Yes, sir. Do you remember when this was approved 22 years ago? It's probably a little bit more contested than right now.
I absolutely do remember that.
I sat in these seats 22 years ago, so I remember the first tattoo parlor that we had come in and massage therapy back in those days. Like, holy smokes! So
I think I was the first.
you need to speak into that mic so they can hear you.
We were the first in all of Cass County, so it was completely new at the time. And if you guys are going to discontinue the special use permit, we will be the last to go across the board. So I just think that's pretty special.
I was just sitting here thinking, it's like, man, I approved this 22 years ago, and it was pretty contested. And people were like, oh, we don't want that in.
I had to talk to a lot of people and try to convince them that we weren't here to take over the town with motorcycles. So,
So,
yeah.
congratulations on your continued tenure around here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. May we be excused? This was super exciting, but are we done?
We're about done. Hold on. You can go after we vote. Unless you want to go now. I'm not keeping you here. If you want to go now, go. Any other questions? Hearing none, roll call.
Councilmember Goff,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
Richardson,
Aye.
White,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Yes. Motion carries. You're done. G, a motion approving resolution, what?
Was she hungry?
I don't know.
I'm hungry.
Motion approving resolution R23-73.
And a resolution approving the purchase of mobile data terminal equipment from Turnkey Mobile, Inc. in the amount of $69,094.
Present.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Go ahead.
Good evening. This is for equipment that we'll be installing in our trucks. They're basically laptops and the mounting equipment to hook them up. This will be a new thing for us. Police department's been used to mobile data terminals for a while. It basically links us with the computer dispatching system to help transmit information more instantly, to transfer notes that we might not want to put over the air. Gives us the ability to go en route by just touching screens instead of consuming time. So it's a technology that's been around. The new CAD system that the ESB is working on currently, this will work much better with it than what we'd had before. It was budgeted for this year. It did come in a little bit higher than what we thought by the time we got everything to hook it up. However, we do have a couple other capital outlay items from this year's budget that we are going to have plenty of excess to be able to cover the overage in this.
Go ahead.
This might be a question for Mayor Larkey, because you sat on that board. I guess my question is, we had a 911 board here for the county that we've been paying taxes into for this, I thought, type services. I mean, and they never created a 911 countywide board. What is that money going to, and why aren't they, is there a grant program that we can get money from this program?
That's what the Emergency Services Board is the County 911 Board. It rolled into that in 2012. So that's what the ESB board.
But what are they using our money for? I mean, we getting money from them then?
So basically, it supports the system. It supports the 911 system.
Radio system.
And so for the dispatchers, the CAD systems are covered in that, but individual equipment is not. And the original plan, when it all passed and the original tax came out, that equipment was included, but after the fact, when you updated equipment, it's not included in that. It's only for the 911 system itself. So the radio units within dispatch, the towers that it takes to communicate between them, and the actual 911 connections.
Well, I mean, again, I go back, I thought they had a lot of money from all the taxes, and they haven't, the original program that people voted on years ago didn't come to fruition, so I'm just trying to figure out what they're doing with all that money. And if you're saying they're using it for their 911 system, it sounds like this is for the 911 system, so I'm just trying to figure out why we're not getting grants for something like this from them. But, I mean, that's just my thoughts.
I agree with you, but I was sorely outnumbered when I was on that board, so.
I'm just trying to figure out what they're doing with all that money they got.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Gotta figure out where I'm at.
Consent.
Consent agenda, one motion, non-debatable, to approve the recommendations noted. Any member of the council may ask for an item to be taken from the consent agenda for discussion and separate action.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Communication from City Council. You're up.
I just want to say the 4th of July event went really good. We had a couple issues with a standoff and the weather, but other than that, everything went really good. Had a great turnout and some good music.
Okay, some updates from Parks. July, like we heard about in the proclamation this evening, is Parks and Recreation Month, and so through the end of the month of July, there's a photo scavenger hunt across our 11 parks, so get out there and snap some photos and I believe win a prize. Also, a reminder, the farmers market is Thursdays 4 to 7 at Assembly of God Church. There are youth sports signups going on now. The Junior Disc Golf League will start again. I think it's the second year in September. The next car cruise night is Saturday, July 22nd. So lots of offerings from parks right now.
Did you talk Taylor into coming next year to our program here in Belton?
You know, I didn't get a hold of her.
Swifty.
Perry?
I don't have anything, Mayor.
Dave?
The only thing I got is I was up here Friday night for the 4th of July celebrations, what I think they called it, and just want to thank everybody that put that on and all the volunteers that helped out. Friday night was a wonderful time. I was not able to make it up here on Saturday, but I heard Saturday went off pretty good, especially in the afternoon with the kids' function. So just want to thank people that put their time and effort into that and put on a celebration for our community.
James?
Nothing to add.
Rob?
Yeah. Three things. First of all, you might have noticed that we have a ramp now next door at the Belton Museum, also railings, and an automatic door opener to comply with the American Disabilities Act. And also, we've gotten rid of the squirrels in the attic. Second, I wanted to publicly thank Greg Rokos and maybe Mike Miller for the crosswalk work, but particularly for MoDOT painting the crosswalks on Y Highway. I heard from Joe that Greg was instrumental in doing it, and I heard from Mike that he was instrumental, and I wrote an email too. But anyway, it got done. That's the main thing, and I noticed people stop more for me. Nobody's tried to run over me yet when there is a painted crosswalk. And finally, I appreciate Julie as doing it solo tonight and doing a good job. The only thing I would ask, if you could, and this is just an ask, is when you write up the minutes, if you could actually, you don't have to name names, but say what some of the discussion points are. I mean, I know there was a lot of discussion the last couple of meetings, and the text was, there was discussion about the topic, and then there were 7 votes yay and 2 absent. But if we could say, like in the points here, 10 years ago, somebody's going to say, why the heck did those guys leave out this amendment on 5-year annual 5-year inspections? And it would be nice to be able to go back to the minutes and see what the pros and cons were. So, thank you.
Brett?
No. Don't have anything, thank you.
Yeah, he's been gone. I would just like to add on to what everybody said about the celebration on July 4th. It was pretty good, real good. Not as good as last year. I don't think we'll ever top that again, but it was great. Saw a lot of people, so it was a good thing. That's all I have. You have anything?
I was just going to mention one thing. GFL mailed out the cards for recycling, so everyone should have received a card at the home. We received 2 main questions. One question is, do I have to take a cart? And the answer is no, you don't have to take a cart. And if you wish not to have one, you can call GFL, the number's on the card, or email them, their information's on the card, and tell them that you don't want to receive one. The other question is what's recyclable and what's not? On that card also, it has got a website you can go to see what's recyclable, what's not. But when the carts are delivered, I worked it out with them to put a door hanger on the handle, so they have an explanation of what is recyclable and what is not right there on the cart for you to take off, and you can take inside your house and read it. That's what I had for you tonight.
Good. All right, you can see the next meeting is July 25th, August 8th, and August 22nd. Item 11 is going to be removed for tonight, so we won't talk about item 11. Motion to enter an executive session to discuss matters pertaining to individual identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment according to Missouri State Statute 610.21.13, and that the record be closed and the meeting adjourned from there.
Present.
Second.
We have a motion. What do you say?
Second. He said second.
So we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Council members Pryan,
Aye.
Powell,
Yes.
White,
Aye.
Clark,
Aye.
Lawson,
Aye.
Goff,
Aye.
Richardson,
Aye.
Mayor Larkey.
Yes. Motion carries.